What's up, guys? So, you're getting a two for today because I want to go ahead and do something fun, do a fun video for today because this day's been an absolute son of a bitch. There's no other word for it. Like, seriously. Somehow, somewhere, a female dog gave birth to this day. Probably in some awful, godforsaken puppy mill, and my heart goes out to her. But still, she is a bitch, and she gave birth to this day that I have been having. I mean, just the most recent thing I dealt with was that earlier I sat down and I read that stupid essay that I was talking about in my last video, and I wrote all my notes, made all my notes for it, and then when I finished, and then when I finished, I I got I realized that I was having low blood sugar because lunch was very light today. So I was having low blood sugar and I needed to get something to eat. And so I go in before I made that video that I put up just now. I go in the kitchen to put on dinner and I realize that I neglected to buy any chicken for dinner tonight. I totally forgot because I thought I had some in the refrigerator already. And so I go out to my car, and it turns out I had forgotten to bring in my groceries, which means I had to throw out four previously perfectly good Yoplait containers. And so the regular the regular grocery store I go to has closed at this point. It's 5 minutes past 10, so I look up a grocery store that's supposed to be open until 11. I get there 40 minutes before they close, and they are supposed to close, and they've already locked up shop for the night. And and so I am at this point getting shaky because I need to stabilize my blood sugar, bring my blood sugar back up. So I go straight to one of the gas station convenience stores and I buy one of those chicken Caesar salads that they're selling pre-made, and I just very quickly scarf all of the chicken from that, and then I go back home and make my peas and corn and that I was going to put with my chicken, and I pair that with some nice noodles, so and so I get a little more satiety, and that was only the most recent of all the bullshit I've been dealing with today, because, as regulars to my channel know, I am detoxing or getting off of SSRIs, getting off Lexapro, and I just 3 days ago stepped down to 2.5 milligrams, and the withdrawal symptoms are already coming back after an entire month of being stable at 5, an entire month of a 2-month process of getting stable at 5 and being stable at 5 milligrams for an entire month. Now we're back in the shit, and it's just been one thing after another. So all of that to say that I wanted to do a more fun video and talk about Type O Negative, because one of my regular viewers messaged me and said, do you like Nightshade 7111 or 7111 or 700 or 7111 or whatever, said, do you like the band Type O Negative, and have you ever been told you look like the late Peter Steele? Sorry if you've been told this loads before. Oh, there is no need to apologize for comparing me to Peter Steele. None at all. I gladly accept that compliment. And Peter Steele is someone that, if I can be compared to him in any capacity whatsoever, any positive light whatsoever, I'm perfectly happy to accept that comparison as many times as it should be put on offer. And yes, I love Type O Negative. I absolutely love Type O Negative. And so yeah, and not only have I been told that I look like him, I have been told I look like him so much that people, when he was still alive, people would confuse me with him. And I'm not quite as tall as Peter. Peter was, I think he was 6'4" and I'm 6'2", but if I put on my boots and the all black and everything, people would seriously, there was a time when people would seriously think that I was Peter Steele. Now, that should have been obvious that I was not Peter, because I was in like my early 20s and Peter was in his late 40s or something at this point. So it should have been obvious that these were two different people, and also that I don't look like this, you know. But nevertheless, people would actually think I was him from time to time. I have gotten comparisons to the most frequent comparisons I've gotten have been to Peter, that I look like Peter Steele, and that I look like Corpse Grinder Fisher from Cannibal Corpse. And I get both of those. I get where both of those are coming from. People have, one person told me I look like Bill Hader, and I don't really see that, aside from being like, we're both pasty white guys with perpetual scowls, but other than that, I don't really see much of a comparison. My dad once told me that I look like, the two people my dad's compared me to that I can recall, Peter Gallagher and Ben Affleck were the people he says. Those are the comparisons I've gotten there. I'm a little more self-deprecating. I think I look like a long-haired Kelsey Grammer, but that's another story. Anyway, before I get into that, though, go any further, because I'll forget to if I don't say it now, patreon.com/JordanWin42 if you want to help me grow the channel and not feel a cold rush of fear every time I check my bank balance. Also, like I said in the previous video, my band Axis of Empires just put out the song Orthodoxy, which is the lead-off single from the re-release, upcoming remixed and remastered re-release of our third album, Heretics and Orthodoxy. That remaster is currently in the works, and what am I pointing at? And you can go check that, hear Orthodoxy, the song Orthodoxy, now on all streaming platforms, and that's, the band is Axis of Empires. I am the guitarist. If you like classic European power metal, Stradivarius, Gamma Ray, Halloween, all of that stuff, this bud's for you. Anyway, so talking about Type O, yes, I absolutely love Type O Negative, so much so, in fact, that Bloody Kisses is sitting right here in this stack of stack of CDs. I would pull it out and hold it up, but I can't because the stack of CDs is holding up that shelf. But anyway, I picked albums that would have like a special meaning for me when I looked at them as like decorations. So like here we've got Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz, and Osmosis. You know, rest in peace, rest in power, Ozzy. I was going to do, by the way, just a video as a tribute to Ozzy and everything, and it's the reason I haven't done that yet is because it's actually been too emotional for me to talk about. And now, as I'm still processing that, the Atlanta metal community is reeling from the loss of Brent Hines, which is also absolutely devastating. But anyway, stuff like that, and let's see, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, this Craig Herndon retrospective album, which is not currently available, but I actually, not only did I produce it, but I was they needed a spoken word narrator for it, like a DJ on a jazz radio station, and I actually provided the voice for that too, so that's up there, and you know, just all kinds of special personal CDs for me, but Bloody Kisses is absolutely one of them. And to tell you about how I discovered Type O and why they're so special to me, I was living in Oxford, Mississippi at the time, and I was a kid, about 15, 16 years old. In fact, I was in 10th grade, I remember at the time when I discovered them, and I was a year ahead of because of where my birthday fell on the calendar, I was a year older than most of my peers, so I was definitely 16 at that point. But anyway, that's how old I was. I discovered Type O. I'd been playing guitar for a few years at that point. And I was very much an enthusiastic fan of, as this will come to no surprise to absolutely anybody, but I was very much a fan of the like goth and cyberpunk subcultures and that kind of thing. They were very fascinating to me. And you have to remember that this was far from being like the pretentious goth kid, Hot Topic goth kid, emo person that we think of now, although those kids are finding themselves as well. I don't want to be too harsh on them. But being, what that was. Think about movies that were either popular or at least had a strong cult following at the time, like The Crow 2, City of Angels, Johnny Mnemonic, Strange Days, and things that had goth and cyberpunk elements to them and everything. I was just fascinated by, and even these things were very popular at the time. Even so much so that movies that were not genre cyberpunk would have these strong cyberpunk Blade Runner type looks and aesthetics and elements to them and everything. Think about like when they did a film adaptation of Double Dragon, the one with, I believe it's Alyssa Milano that's in it. It's a very cheap movie product tie-in thing that they did, but it has a cyberpunk aesthetic to it. When they did the Super Mario Brothers movie, even that had a cyberpunk aesthetic. And if there's anything that you commonly associate with cyberpunk, of course it's Super Mario Brothers. And if I said cyberpunk Super Mario Brothers and you don't immediately know what I'm talking about, that's probably because you're too young to remember the original ridiculously awful Super Mario Brothers adaptation, which was, I kid you not, that was my introduction to the idea that, as a small person, that was my introduction to the idea that movies could be bad. I thought all movies were good until I saw that movie, and then I was like, I watched the whole thing, but no happy. What, Anyway, but suffice it all to say, I was very fascinated with, cyberpunk and goth aesthetics, and the first two Crow movies, big favorites. The Johnny Mnemonic, big favorite. Strange Days, big favorite of mine. Escape from New York, favorite of mine. Escape from LA, favorite of mine. And then I love William Gibson, of course. I'm a huge William Gibson fan, which is why I have two copies of Midori. Which one is the signed one? It's the paperback version. And I actually have this and a signed copy of Neuromancer as well. So I did not get to meet him personally. My dad met him on a business trip and got him to sign a couple of books for me. Had the opportunity to meet him. It wasn't just a chance encounter. But anyway, so this was all very important to me. And as you can imagine, well, actually, maybe you can't imagine. I don't know how old you are, but late 90s, living in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, Oxford was a lot more cosmopolitan than a lot of Mississippi because it had the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. It had it right there, and that was very much a cultural epicenter of the South. Because of that, Oxford had a strong arts community, a strong music community, a very strong literature community, like stronger than the strongest literature community you can possibly imagine. Very strong literary community. And to give you an idea of how strong of a literary community, John Grisham, Donna Tartt, Barry Hannah, and Larry Brown were all associates, friends, and colleagues of one another in Oxford. You have Donna Tartt, who is currently most famous for writing The Goldfinch, and John Grisham need no introduction. Barry Hannah and Larry Brown are more, if you're really, really familiar with not cult authors, but like they have a cult following among fans of Southern literature. But anyway, it was a huge cultural epicenter. But even then, so much of popular culture had such a hard time penetrating into our snow globe of a culture that we occupied, where, and this was especially true with heavy music. The average kid that I went to high school with would have known who Metallica was. They would have known who Marilyn Manson was, they would have known who Korn was, and they would have probably known who Limp Bizkit was, because all four of those artists were extremely popular at the time. So even if they were not personally fans of those artists, they would at least know who they were. But for beyond that, you have no idea just how little most people knew about anything to do with heavy music. Even Tool which is one of the biggest bands on the planet now. They were extremely popular back then. They're not. They had put out around this time. They had put out Anima, which is kind of like in the Tool canon. That's kind of like their Dark Side of the Moon, if you will. And they had put out Anima, and that was extremely popular. But even that was not as popular. It was not that popular. Like kids in my gang knew, my crowd of people knew who Tool was and liked Tool. But yeah, like most people, as deep as they got was like Lenny Kravitz and Green Day. You know, that kind of, that level of, that was their awareness. And it was also our popular culture among the kids in that atmosphere was very much more oriented towards country, like it, as you can imagine. So it was, and this was before, you know, the dot-com boom was happening as all this was happening. The bubble, the dot-com bubble had not burst yet, and so the internet was getting more popular. But even so, like, it was still just nerds like me that spent time on the internet. It was not this ubiquitous thing that we access instantly all day long without even thinking about it. This was the age of dial-up modems, where like you know, like I can vividly remember going on Dilbert.com to watch to look at that day's installment of Dilbert, and getting up and going to the kitchen and making a sandwich and eating it and coming back into the room, the computer room where the computer was, and the Dilbert comic had not finished fully loading yet. Like it was still not all, you know, still not legible on the screen yet. It was slowly coming into view. That was the internet back then. So it was every little morsel that you could get from every little morsel that you could get from this magical world of all of these things that I was obsessed with. You know, again, Johnny Mnemonic, Strange Days especially. Eon Flux was another huge one. Eon Flux, and you know, The Matrix came out around this time. That was big, big for me and big for a lot of people. All of this stuff just felt like a dispatch from another dimension of science fiction gothic salvation. And and again, this was before a lot of this was so prefabricated and formulaic like it is now. It felt a lot more organic back then because it was very much a burgeoning underground thing. There really is no, I don't think really is any underground culture anymore. People just go into their little silos of what they like, and that's it. So around this time was when Typo Negative put out World Coming Down, and I remember noticing it on the listening kiosk in the record store at the mall. But beyond that, it didn't get very much publicity. But I remember noticing the album and everything, and listening to a little of it in the first couple of tracks, and it was, you know, immediately I was just, it was captivating. The first actual song on World Coming Down is White Slavery, and it was just immediately captivating. But it didn't capture as fascinating as it was. I didn't listen to it very long. I was just, you know, was just passing through different things. And Typo, as you know, builds very slowly and builds very carefully in their songs and everything. So, you know, the song White Slavery, I probably listened to it enough to hear that dramatic organ and intro and the snare drum, the, you know, funeral sounding snare drum coming in, and then the giant thick wall of guitars and all that. A little bit of that, but then I kind of moved on to other things. But it was still very much, that sound was very much in the wheelhouse of what I was getting into. Like I mentioned, Escape from LA, that movie had been huge for me as a kid, and I'd gotten the soundtrack of that, and that was how, that soundtrack was how I had discovered Tool, White Zombie, Stabbing Westward, and so on, and so forth. Everything that's on that album. Every band that's on that album, that's how I discovered them. And it's funny, it's like Sugar Ray has a metal song on that album, like a balls to the wall. It's just a balls to the wall, brutal new metal, you know, burning, heavy song, and then like a year later they put out the song Fly, and they're this like mainstream soft rock adult contemporary band. It's the weirdest thing. Anyway, so I was aware of Typo, but what happened was this kid moved to town, and he moved from the big city, and I had moved to Oxford after fifth grade, which it was. I moved to Oxford from Roswell, Georgia, and that was a little bit of a culture shock to me. Like you really do at the time, being in Oxford, even though there was, like I said, it was more cosmopolitan than most of Mississippi at the time, you still felt like you're in a snow globe. You still feel cut off from the rest of the world. So it was a little bit of a culture shock. This guy, on the other hand, he moved to Oxford, started Oxford High School, with having already established himself in high school in the big city, and he was fucking miserable, man, and I don't blame him. It was really hard on him. But this kid moved to town, and he very quickly became a part of my circle of friends, because I took to him very quickly. So I was the one that said, "Come sit with us at lunch" and everything. And he was very, very, very much into goth and industrial stuff and everything. And Nine Inch Nails was his favorite band. I loved Nine Inch Nails too. The Fragile had just come out. We both loved The Fragile, and that's my favorite Nine Inch Nails album and one of my all-time favorite albums to this day. And so we both loved The Fragile, and we bonded over that. We both loved Marilyn Manson, and so very much on a musical level, felt like I was finding very much a kindred spirit there. And again, you have to understand, like, even within my circle of friends, I was into stuff that they were not into, that they were not aware of, weren't into. Dream Theater. Dream Theater had a fandom at my high school of exactly one person. That was me, And so that's the world that I occupied at the time. And it was so very refreshing to meet somebody that had that was in the know about these things and everything. And he turned me on to Typo Negative, got me to start listening to World Coming Down had just come out. But he came over to my house one day and he put on Typo, and we listened to the Typo Negative rendition of Summer Breeze. I had not heard the Seals and Crofts original yet, but I was completely sold. As soon as I heard Summer Breeze, I was like, oh my god, wow. And oh man, that was incredible. That was absolutely transcendental. And, it's funny, to this person I'm talking to, you had written in on my videos talking about why, asking the question, why don't rockers sing about sex anymore? And we talked back and forth. You said something and I responded, talking about that issue from a sociological standpoint. From the standpoint of people nowadays feeling like rockers singing about sex is overdone and everything. Well, looking at it rather from an artistic standpoint, I think you would probably agree with me that the success of male rock stars singing about sexuality kind of rises and falls on the success of it from an artistic standpoint, rises and falls on the sex appeal of the person singing the song. And at this time, Jim Morrison was my god, my role model, my lizard king, in every possible way, every possible regard. He was to me, he was the coolest person on the planet. Or he wasn't alive at that point, but there had never been a cooler person than Jim Morrison. There had never been and beyond that, the Doors are also one of my biggest musical influences, and one of the things I love about studying music as I have is I can go back and, like, at every stage of my musical evolution, The Doors have meant something new to me. Jim Morrison, the aura of Jim Morrison, the words, the poetry, that meant something to me in my formative years. Then as I started studying, jazz and jazz theory and everything, the jazz theory that was undergirding their music. I got to go back and discover their music again through that. You look at like the flamenco styles and fusion styles that Robbie Krieger is channeling on guitar, and I get to go back and be influenced again. So it's one of those bands you get to rediscover. But anyway, Jim Morrison was so huge to me. And when I listened to Peter Steele, I thought, his voice, his singing, everything, like, this is the guy, probably the best person since Jim Morrison to hit that level of sexual and romantic intensity in his music. And even when it's an angry song about relationships. Like, the song "I Know You're Fucking Someone Else," which is actually, I know it's really a vignette within a larger suite of songs. But that song, "I Know You're Fucking Someone Else," where he starts out, "Don't think for a minute, I don't know what you're doing, you stupid," all of that. And even when he's singing in the song, he sings, "Yeah, I'm a man." The way he hits it perfectly, where it's like, yes, you actually feel in the tone of his voice, in the way he's saying it, in the way he's delivering it, that conflict between masculine bluster and masculine identity and the more softer, tender person underneath that has really been damaged by the actions of this person that's cheating on him. Like, you feel it in a real honest way, and Peter hit that stride so perfectly in his delivery, where you felt all of the sexual energy, all of the romantic energy, all of the anger, all of the like vague hints of violence and intensity and mad or mental illness, if you want to say, in his voice and in his lyrics and his themes and all of that. You felt all of it in this very organic way, and it's like it's not an act he's putting on. It was not like a lot of, let's be honest, 80s glam rockers where the long-haired type A personality, big dicked thing that they were portraying. This was a character that they were portraying that people were expecting them to portray. Versus Peter, it was just who he was, and what he was this, on so many levels, this delicate, hurting, scared person, weak person at heart, this scared child at heart, which I could relate to, which I can still relate to. He was also this brooding, sinister, darkly erotic, daring, dangerous sort of presence, which I can, I find appealing. I don't know how well I could embody that, but I sense the appeal and the raw danger of that and everything, and all the way up to him being this goth rock sex god thing. I mean, the man posed in Playboy, for crying out loud. But at every stage, Playgirl, sorry. But at every stage of it, he was a rock god, and it was sincerely who he was. There was no artifice. There was nothing fake about it. Just showing up honestly, he was still this sensitive badass. I'll never forget the thing that I think it's on a Jerry Springer episode where he's talking about being having sex with groupies, and if it's Jerry Springer or whoever the host is, says, "Well, do you ever worry about getting a false rape accusation from one of these women?" And he says, it's just so perfect. He says, "I have $30,000 of credit card debt. I don't have time to worry about what could happen." It's like, oh, God, I love him so much. Just so awesome. And so, yeah, Peter was instantly appealing, and that radiated through in his music. I got Bloody Kisses and became entranced by the album. In fact, funny enough, my band had a show last week, We put a bunch of covers in there, and originally we were going to do an edited version. We didn't have enough time for the whole thing, but to do an edited version of Black Number One, we were actually going to do that, and we didn't. We decided not to do it because Ozzy passed, and sadly, and so we put Paranoid in there quickly, as replaced it with Paranoid as a tribute to Ozzy. Uh, but it would be nice to do Black Number One, and the venue we were playing at, the crowd we were playing at, would have definitely loved to hear Black Number One. But anyway, Christian Woman was such a fascinating piece to me because I was in the Episcopal Church at the time, and I really liked the church that I went to. I liked the people. I liked the culture. I liked it had a very compassionate and liberal attitude about Christianity, which is something I continue to practice to this day as a Christian. I liked it a lot, but at the same time, I had, and that church had very liberal, in general, liberal attitudes about sex. Not that they were encouraging some kind of hedonism, but they were a lot more understanding and patient and compassionate about, teenagers, growing up and having sexual urges, and they were absolutely not the people that were going to beat you over the head with a cross because you got a boner or something like that. And so I felt safe and comfortable in that contained environment. And then outside of that environment, I was absolutely terrified of the Christianity that was being practiced in that town. So much so that, like, my Episcopal youth group that I went to that I really liked, we had to have a sit-down meeting one day at youth group about what the appropriate response was if someone from, I won't say the name, but one particular Baptist church in that community confronted you and told you you're going to hell because they were so militant and so aggressive and so mean-spirited. What's the appropriate response if someone, because you don't want to, you don't want to alienate them, you don't want to, you want to turn the other cheek, you want to be compassionate, but you also don't want to be mistreated. What's the appropriate response? Like, these are the discussions we were having. And so I had this weird relationship with Christianity where I was not at all in conflict with the way I was practicing it, but I was deeply in conflict with the way other people were practicing it. And when I heard the song Christian Woman, like, it didn't feel like blasphemy to me. It felt so organically beautiful to be, like, tapping into something of, like, yes, there are people who have an erotic fixation on Jesus and Jesus Christ, and it's so liberating to hear somebody just honestly talking about it, like talking about this being the honest, erotic substrates of this person's obsession with Jesus. It never felt blasphemous at all. It just felt like, it just felt honest. It didn't feel like he was trying to provoke. It just felt so sincere. And that was the thing. Peter always seemed so sincere. And musically, Bloody Kisses is only the beginning of, really of what Type O became. The real Type O Negative, I think most people would agree, the magnum opus is October Rust. I think that is a phenomenal record, and probably you could argue that's their best record. My personal favorite is World Coming Down, again, and part of it has to do with that just being the album that was current when I discovered them. But to me, World Coming Down, there's an interesting. World Coming Down is a very transitional record in a lot of ways, and here's the thing. October Rust was, I think, the most perfect realization of Type O Negative's vision, which was to be sincerely but blatantly sexual in their music, to be sincerely espouse Peter's philosophy, if you will, how he saw the world and that kind of thing, and a lot of the conflicts he had with mental health issues and his very morbid view on the world versus his passion for life and the arts and creativity and, of course, sex and sexuality and love. It all comes together best in October Rust, but World Coming Down, in light of where the band was going, I think it's interesting. It's a less sexual album and a more an album that grapples more with Peter's cocaine addiction, which is what White Slavery is about. Grapples more with his mental health issues, his depression, and things like that. And it's in that regard, it really does hit like a ton of bricks, even now. Like right now, I've had to be very cognizant of the media I consume right now while I'm going through this SSRI tapering process, because I'm dealing with, depression and the jitters from withdrawal symptoms and everything. I would not put on World Coming Down right now. October Rust, perhaps. Bloody Kisses, perhaps. I can perform a song from it. That's not a big deal. But to sit down and listen to, I would put on those records, perhaps. Would not put on World Coming Down. As much as it's my favorite record by Typo Negative, I would not put that record on right now because it's too dark and too disturbing, or too dark and too morbidly depressing for me right now. But musically, oh my God! To me, as much as October Rust again is the magnum opus, there's just and I love Josh Silver probably has his best performance on October Rust. His piano work, especially on like Love You to Death and things like that. It's just the keyboard work is phenomenal, and he creates such lush soundscapes. His chordal voicings are absolutely gorgeous. He has these huge, wide open chord voicings that he's doing and everything. And there's moments in there that are clearly drawing from like new age influences and like almost smooth jazz influences in a way. His keyboard work is phenomenal. Weirdly enough, I honestly prefer Kenny Hickey's guitar tone on World Coming Down more so than on October Rust. His guitar tone made sense on Bloody Kisses because there's supposed to be an almost punkish quality to the overall vibe of that record. Weirdly enough, it just doesn't work on October Rust for me. I would love to have the World Coming Down guitar tone on October Rust. That alone would probably be enough to make October Rust my favorite Typo record. But anyway, but he hit regardless of that, they definitely hit the sexuality window perfectly, as from what I was describing. I would imagine you'd agree with me. Not to put words in your mouth. The last two Typo Negative records I almost never listen to. And it's because it's one of those things where it's like you don't realize it at the time, but something feels different at that point. Peter was in a very different place. Peter was hurting. We know he was hurting. We know how much he was hurting in those last years of his life. And, he said something that I think was very revealing. Towards the end of the Typo Negative, what would ultimately be the end of Typo Negative's existence, Josh Silver started studying to become a paramedic, be an EMT, and I think that's awesome. By the way, he's goes from being a rock god to being out there saving lives. I mean, good for him. I know Kenny Hickey and John Kelly have gone on to have other performed in other bands. They've continued to be performing, working musicians, and good for them. I mean, that's awesome. But mad props to Josh Silver, too, for doing something like that. But anyway, he started studying to become a paramedic, and Peter Steele was very open about the fact that Josh was doing that because he was tired. He was tired of waiting on Peter to get his shit together so they could do another Typo record. And Peter even said, "I don't blame him. I wouldn't wait for me either." And so that's that was very sad. And some good things came into Peter's life towards the end. He became a Christian, became a Roman Catholic, which is not the denomination that I practice, but What did he say? I think it was something like, "I just can't believe that Adolf Hitler would go to the same place as Mother Teresa." Never stop being a quit machine. But he gave his life to Christ, which is beautiful, and I do think there's sincere, beautiful religiosity in the Type O Negative music, and all of that. But those last two records just hit differently. Life is Killing Me, I think because um, two things, two factors. I listened to it when I listened to it while I was at Berkeley and Berkeley College of Music in Boston, and so my mind was in a very different mindset when I heard it. As much as I still loved Type O Negative as a band and still love that music and even still listen to it, like my mind was very much like talking about this stack of favorite albums and everything, or just albums I picked that were meaningful to me. Like there's Weather Report and Jean-Luc Ponty in there, and Pharoah Sanders is in there, and other stuff like that. Like I was very much in jazz fusion and jazz theory and that kind of thing. So Life is Killing Me came out, and I listened to the song I Don't Want to Be Me. In fact, I listened to the record sitting there in the Berkeley library. Again, this was streaming was not really a thing yet, and the rule was at Berkeley, if you were busted downloading or copying music, you would get a warning and then you would be expelled. And I think at the time that was the rule at the time, and I think that mainly applied to ripping off ripping off the CDs in the library, which didn't stop people from going in there with their laptops and brazenly burning off the CDs and everything. But anyway, streaming was not a thing yet. You could put songs on your iPod, but that was about it. But I would sit. You could not leave with the CDs. You had to sit and listen to them on the listening consoles in the Berkeley Library. And if you needed to make if you had to learn a song for class, the thing you were allowed to do, and you need to get it from them, the thing you could do is take a cassette tape and put it in the deck that had the CD player on it, had a tape deck too, and you could record that song, that kind of thing. But anyway, so they had Life is Killing Me. They had gotten Life is Killing Me in, and I took that and sat and listened to it. And I just wasn't crazy about it. And I think that song, I Don't Want to Be Me, was a little too punkish for what I was wanting. To me, I felt like Type O had graduated out of punk rock. Punk rock, the hardcore thing, that was early. They had matured out of that, and this felt like a regression in a way. So that didn't register as much with me. The rest of the record was okay. I thought that, I remember the main other song that stood out to me was the song I Like Goils, just because of how politically incorrect it was, but for no other reason than that. And so I just kind of thought, I wasn't that taken with it. But after that, the last album came out, and I never really listened to it, and still don't. Like, when I'm in a Type O Negative mood, it's Bloody Kisses, October Rust, World Coming Down, one of those. So I would like to go listen to that, sit down with that record and really take it in at some point, but I just never have. And it just felt like there was something different in the air. It just felt like Peter was not going to be, Peter was not the same. I thought he was going to break up the band. Is what I thought was going to happen. I thought he was going to eventually just give up on Type O Negative altogether and want to quit the band and just give up on it. That's what I thought was going to happen. But instead, sadly, he passed away. And I know it was something to do with heart failure and that kind of thing that he passed away, and I think a lot of those addictions and those vices caught up with him, which is very sad. And I will say that is losing people like that to preventable things like lifestyle decisions is one of the things that's motivated me. Like, one of the motivating factors to get off these SSRIs for me was that they were making it impossible for me to lose weight, and I had to lose weight to get my blood pressure back down, which I have, thank God. So things like that, it did inspire me that way. And I remember hearing a couple of songs off the last record that I really liked when I saw the music videos and everything, or whatever it was that I saw of it. But I never really got into it. But again, it just wasn't the same at that point. And I think the humor, Peter had lost a lot of his sense of humor, even though the first record, the last record, Life is Killing Me, had a lot of that sense of humor on it. It rang hollow because life really was killing him. And so it's so sad the way it went out. And one of my friends, a friend of mine as an adult said, said I would give up all of the Typo Negative albums if it could have just meant that Peter would have been happy and alive working the job he loved doing for the Brooklyn Parks and Recreation Department and everything, that he quit to do Typo Negative. And I feel that. I really feel that in my bones. Especially as I've been doing this SSRI tapering, and depression has been, waves of depression have been a problem for me. I felt that so much. Like I would give up all. I would, if I could, if I had to make the deal, if I could, I'd go running up that hill to make a deal with God. And I would, not to swap places with Peter, but mind you, waiting for, careful about divine judgment there. But to say, like, yeah, if it was up to me, if I had to choose between Peter being happy and alive, working the job he loved for the Brooklyn Parks system, and having Typo Negative, I would pick him being alive and happy. And it's I don't mean to get too morbid with all of this, but it does hurt to think about. And as much of a captivating and fascinating and majestic influence as he was in my life, he was still such a hurting person. And I will tell you firsthand, as a musician and a creative person, that this business is full of so many lost souls and so many hurting people. And I think about, like, I may have mentioned on the channel, a guy I used to be in a band with, was briefly in a band with. We only did, like, a handful of rehearsals together, and the band never got off the ground. It was a guy named Zach Romero, who played in a band called Bog Monkey here in Atlanta. He committed suicide earlier this year. And if you had known Zach personally, I had not talked to Zach in a couple of years really, but the guys in his band said, if you'd known him, you would have known this funny, silly, quirky little guy that we all loved. He was such a great guy. I thought he was a great person too when I knew him. The band we were going to do didn't work out, but he was such a nice guy. But they also knew how much pain he was in, and he committed suicide. And you should never do that, and it's never the right answer. It's absolutely not the right answer, and I hate that happened. But I also know his pain, that kind of pain, and I know where he was coming from. And so that, to leave it on a sad note, that's how I feel about Peter too. And he didn't die of suicide, obviously, but a life of a lot of personal pain and a lot of bad decisions really did catch up with him. And that breaks my heart, And it is like a thing. The great thing about Typo Negative, I talk about their sincerity, though, and how none of what they expressed ever felt fake or phony or contrived or anything like that. And for all of the songs they had, like songs like a song like "Everyone I Love Is Dead," or "Everything Dies," and songs like that. They also had songs that were full of humor and full of warmth and full of joy and all of that. And you hold on to those moments, Not to make this too morbid. This is to answer your question about if I like Typo Negative. And hopefully that answers it. Yes, I do. I absolutely love Typo Negative. And, like I said, I wish they were still around and still doing their thing, but more so than that, I wish Peter was happy and could have had more happiness in life, because I know he was hurting. But anyway, there's your answer, and that was a far more enjoyable video to do than the last one. So thank you. Fun topic.